The sound of his daughter's laughter was still echoing in Michael's ears when he saw them, 3 young men surrounding a woman at the bus stop, their postures predatory, her face a mask of controlled fear. In that moment, something inside him shifted. If you've ever wondered what ordinary courage looks like in an extraordinary moment, stay with me until the end of this story. I promise you won't forget what happened next. Before we dive deeper into Michael's story, if you're enjoying content that showcases real human courage and compassion, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us share more stories that remind us of the good still left in this world. Michael Walsh hadn't considered himself a hero. At 38, his life revolved around his 8-year-old daughter Emma and the small carpentry business he'd built after his wife's death 3 years ago. The weight of single parenthood had bent his shoulders slightly, etched fine lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before Sarah passed. But it had also given him a quiet strength he didn't know he possessed, a resilience forged in the crucible of grief and responsibility. The modest home they shared in Millfield still bore Sarah's touches, the hand-painted kitchen cabinets, the garden she'd lovingly cultivated, now maintained by Michael's imperfect but determined efforts. Her absence remained a physical presence in their lives, a void they navigated daily with memories as their compass. Michael had learned to cook her recipes, to braid Emma's hair the way Sarah once did, to be both mother and father to a child who sometimes still cried for her mom in the middle of the night. That Tuesday evening had been ordinary. He'd picked Emma up from her after-school program, they'd grabbed ice cream at the corner shop, a small weekly tradition that felt sacred in its simplicity, and were walking home through downtown when he saw the scene unfolding across the street. The late September air carried the first hint of autumn, golden light slanting through the trees that lined Main Street, casting long shadows across the sidewalks. The woman couldn't have been more than 25, clutching her purse to her chest like a shield. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, her business casual attire suggesting she was heading home from work. The 3 men, boys, really, probably no older than 20, had formed a half-circle around her, cutting off her escape routes. One leaned in too close, saying something that made the others laugh. Even from across the street, Michael could see her shoulders hunch, her body language screaming discomfort. She took a small step backward, only to find herself pressed against the bus stop shelter. "Daddy, what are those boys doing?" Emma's voice pulled at him, ice cream dripping unnoticed down her wrist. Her eyes, so like her mother's, followed his gaze across the street with innocent curiosity. Michael squeezed his daughter's hand. "Stay right here, sweetheart. Don't move." He positioned her against the storefront of Hendrick's bookshop, where the elderly owner was arranging a window display. "I mean it, Emma. Count to 60, okay? Like we practice for hide and seek." Emma nodded solemnly, her eyes wide as she began counting in a whisper. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Her small voice faded as Michael stepped off the curb. Michael crossed the street with measured steps. He wasn't a large man, 5'10", lean from physical work rather than gym-built. His hands bore the calluses and small scars of his trade, his faded jeans and work boots dusty from a day spent installing shelving at the local library. But there was something in his walk that made a woman walking her dog pause, a teenager lower his phone to watch. It wasn't aggression or bravado, it was purpose. "Excuse me," Michael's voice carried clearly in the evening air. "Is everything all right here?" The tallest of the 3 turned, annoyance flashing across his face. He wore an expensive leather jacket despite the mild weather, designer jeans, the carefully cultivated look of someone with money to burn and time to waste. "Mind your business, old man. We're just talking." The woman's eyes met Michael's, relief and fear mingling in equal measure. Up close, he could see the slight tremble in her hands, the way she'd positioned her keys between her fingers in her right hand, a small defense measure women learn too young. "I just want to catch my bus," she said quietly. "Sounds like the lady's done talking," Michael said, stepping closer. He positioned himself slightly between her and the young men. "Why don't you guys move along? The second youth, baseball cap turned backward, an expensive watch glinting on his wrist, stepped forward. His breath smelled of alcohol, though it was barely past 5. "Who the hell do you think you are? Her dad?" The third one snickered, emboldened by his friend's bravado. This one was shorter, with a patchy attempt at a beard and a smartphone in his hand that Michael realized with a chill might have been recording the woman's discomfort. Michael didn't raise his voice when he responded. That's what everyone would remember later, how quiet he was, how still. "No. But I am a dad. And I'm teaching my daughter over there what men should act like." He nodded toward Emma, still counting dutifully against the storefront across the street, her small fingers keeping track of numbers. "Right now, you're teaching her what men shouldn't be." Something in his tone made the street go silent. A passing car slowed. The woman at the bus stop straightened her shoulders slightly. 2 men exiting the coffee shop down the block paused, sensing the tension in the air. "Whatever, man. She wasn't even that hot anyway." The third youth tugged at his friend's sleeve, suddenly aware of the attention they were drawing. "Let's go." But the tall one wasn't ready to back down. He stepped closer to Michael, close enough that Michael could smell mint gum and the faint scent of beer. "What if we don't want to leave?" "What then, hero?" Michael didn't flinch. His heart was hammering against his ribs, but his voice remained steady, but something in his eyes made the young man hesitate. "Then I call the police. And while we wait, I explain to my 8-year-old daughter why 3 grown men need to intimidate someone half their combined size to feel powerful. I tell her that real strength isn't about making others feel small. It's about standing up when it would be easier to walk away." The silence stretched. Somewhere, a car horn honked. The bus appeared at the corner, lumbering toward the stop. A small crowd had gathered now, the woman with the dog, the teenager with the phone now recording this confrontation instead, an elderly couple who had paused their evening walk. The tall youth's face flushed. For a moment, Michael thought he might throw a punch. His fists clenched at his sides, and Michael braced himself, wondering if he remembered enough from the boxing lessons he'd taken in college to defend himself. He thought of Emma watching, of what it would teach her if he walked away now, of what Sarah would have expected from him. Instead, the young man spat on the sidewalk near Michael's shoes. "Whatever. Crazy old man." He jerked his head at his friends. "Let's bounce." As they slouched away, tossing insults over their shoulders that sounded hollow even to their own ears, Michael turned to the woman. "Are you okay?" She nodded, blinking rapidly. Her mascara was slightly smudged, as if she'd been fighting tears. "Thank you. They wouldn't let me leave. I kept saying I needed to catch my bus, but they just..." She trailed off, adjusting the strap of her purse with trembling fingers. "They followed me from the coffee shop. At first, I thought they were just being friendly, but then they started asking personal questions, where I lived, if I had a boyfriend." "I'm sorry that happened to you," Michael said simply. He noticed a small pin on her lapel, the logo of Millfield Community College. "Do you work at the college?" "I'm an academic advisor," she said, her professional composure returning gradually. "First year on the job. I'm still learning my way around town." She glanced at the retreating figures of the young men. "I guess I'm learning which parts to avoid too." The bus pulled up with a hydraulic sigh. The woman hesitated, then touched Michael's arm briefly. "What you said about teaching your daughter, that was really something." She glanced across the street where Emma had finished counting and was watching wide-eyed, her ice cream cone now a sticky puddle by her feet. "She has a good dad." After she boarded the bus, Michael crossed back to Emma, who immediately wrapped her arms around his waist. "Did you help that lady, Daddy?" Michael smoothed her hair, auburn like her mother's, catching the late afternoon sunlight. "I tried to, sweetheart." "Were those boys being mean?" Michael knelt down to her level, choosing his words carefully. The weight of parenting never felt heavier than in these moments, when he had to explain the darker parts of humanity to a child who still believed in the inherent goodness of people. They weren't being respectful. Everyone deserves to feel safe and respected, especially when they're alone. Emma considered this, her ice cream forgotten and melting. Her small brow furrowed in concentration. Like how Mom always said to use our strong voice if someone makes us uncomfortable. A lump formed in Michael's throat. Sarah had been so deliberate about teaching Emma to trust her instincts, to speak up, to set boundaries. Even in her absence, her wisdom continued to guide them. Exactly like that. Mom was very smart. I think those boys needed to learn about strong voices, Emma said with the simple clarity of childhood. She slipped her small hand into his larger one. Can we get another ice cream? Mine melted. As they walked to the ice cream shop, Michael noticed people watching them, the woman with the dog, an elderly man on a bench, the teenager who had lowered his phone. Their eyes held something like respect, maybe even gratitude. One man nodded at him as they passed. The owner of the ice cream shop refused to let Michael pay for Emma's replacement cone. This one's on the house, he said with a meaningful look. We need more folks willing to step up. That night, after tucking Emma into bed, Michael sat on his porch steps, a cup of cooling coffee beside him. The neighborhood was quiet, porch lights glowing in the darkness, the distant sound of a television from next door. His hands were shaking slightly, the delayed reaction to adrenaline, to fear. He wasn't fearless, he had simply found something that mattered more than fear. He thought about what could have happened. The young men could have turned violent. He could have been hurt, leaving Emma without either parent. The risk had been real. But so was the danger to the young woman, alone and cornered. In that moment of decision, the calculation had been simple, her immediate safety outweighed his potential risk. His phone buzzed with a text from his neighbor, Diane, heard what happened downtown. Emma must be proud of her dad. Sarah would be too. The words blurred as his eyes filled. Sarah had always been the brave one, the one who knew exactly what to say, what to do. She'd been the first to confront injustice, to stand up for others. After losing her, he'd felt like half a parent, stumbling through each day, wondering if he was enough for their daughter. But today, for the first time in 3 years, he felt like maybe he was doing okay. Maybe he was teaching Emma what mattered after all. Maybe Sarah's courage lived on in the lessons he was passing to their daughter. He scrolled through his phone to a picture of Sarah, laughing, her hair wild in the wind at the beach during their last family vacation. I'm trying, he whispered to the image. I'm really trying to raise her the way we planned. The story of what happened at the bus stop spread through their small town of Millfield. The local paper ran a piece about bystander intervention. Michael's phone rang with calls from friends and acquaintances who had heard various versions of the story, some exaggerated to the point where he'd supposedly fought off armed attackers. He corrected them gently, uncomfortable with the attention. The woman, her name was Lily Martinez, he learned later, sent a thank you card to his carpentry shop. You made me believe in good men again, she wrote. In a world where it's easier to look away, you chose to see me. Thank you for reminding me that for every person who means harm, there are others willing to help. Michael didn't feel like a hero. He had simply done what he hoped anyone would do. What he would want someone to do if Emma was alone and afraid someday. The thought of his daughter in a similar situation made his stomach clench with dread. He enrolled her in a children's self-defense class the following week. The incident prompted conversations in their community. The local high school held an assembly about respect and intervention. The coffee shop where Lily had first encountered the young men posted signs about their zero-tolerance policy for harassment. Small changes, perhaps, but meaningful ones. 2 weeks later, Michael was installing cabinets in a new restaurant downtown when the owner introduced him to the head chef, a tall young man with a familiar face. It was the youth from the bus stop, the one who had called him old man. Recognition flashed between them. The young man, Jason, according to his chef's coat, flushed dark red. "You two know each other?" the owner asked, sensing the tension. "We've met," Michael said simply, returning to his measurement. The restaurant was upscale, aiming to bring fine dining to their small town. The owner, a successful businessman who had returned to his hometown after years in Chicago, had spared no expense on the renovation. Michael had been working on the custom cabinetry for weeks, crafting each piece by hand in his workshop. Later, as Michael was packing up his tools, Jason approached him, hands shoved deep in his pockets. The kitchen staff had left for the day, and the dining room was empty except for the owner going over paperwork at the bar. "Hey, about the other week. That was messed up. What we did." Michael continued cleaning his workspace, not making it easy for him. The memory of the woman's fear was still fresh in his mind. "I've been thinking about what you said. About real strength." Jason shifted uncomfortably, his chef's whites crisp and professional, at odds with the sullen youth from the bus stop. "My dad was kind of a bully. To my mom, to us kids. I always swore I'd never be like him, but then I catch myself sometimes." Michael finally looked up, seeing not the cocky youth from the bus stop but a young man struggling with the legacy of what he'd been taught. The vulnerability in his admission was unexpected. "It takes courage to recognize that in yourself." Jason nodded, swallowing hard. "I'm in therapy now. Started last year when I realized I was heading down his path. But sometimes I still slip up, especially when I'm with certain friends." He gestured vaguely, presumably referring to his companions from that day. "Anyway, I just wanted to say, you were right. And I'm sorry." "Have you apologized to the woman?" Michael asked, his voice neutral. Jason looked down. "No. I don't know who she is. But I would if I could." "There are other ways to make amends," Michael said after a moment. "Actions speak louder than words." "Yeah," Jason agreed quietly. "That's why I volunteer at the women's shelter now. Teaching cooking classes." A faint smile crossed his face. "Turns out I'm good at something besides being a jerk." As Michael drove home that evening, he thought about cycles, how they perpetuate unless someone has the courage to break them. How one moment of standing up or speaking out can create ripples that touch lives in ways we never see. Jason was trying to break his cycle. Michael was trying to raise Emma without the blueprint he and Sarah had planned to follow together. Everyone was just doing their best with the hand they'd been dealt. The autumn sun was setting earlier now, casting long shadows across the road. Michael drove past the bus stop where it had happened, now empty in the gathering dusk. He wondered about Lily Martinez, if she felt safe waiting there now, if the incident had left lasting scars on her sense of security. He hoped not. He hoped that his intervention had balanced out the harm, at least a little. Emma was waiting on the porch steps when he pulled into the driveway, homework spread around her, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. Mrs. Abernathy from next door waved from her own porch, having kept an eye on Emma until he arrived home. Their neighborhood was like that, a web of informal support that had tightened around them after Sarah's death. Emma looked up and waved, her smile so like her mother's it made his heart catch. "Hey, Dad. I'm writing a story for school about everyday heroes. Can I interview you?" Michael laughed, setting down his toolbox. "I'm no hero, Em." She looked at him with Sarah's serious eyes. "Mom used to say heroes are just regular people who do the right thing even when it's hard. That sounds like you to me." Michael sat beside her on the steps, looking at the notebook where she'd carefully written her assignment in her best handwriting. "What do you want to know? Were you scared? When you helped that lady?" He considered lying, then decided against it. Emma deserved honesty. "Yes. I was scared.